To the March 11th, 2021 meeting of the Pleasanton Unified School District. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight, just a few comments as we've been doing lately. As you probably know from watching our meetings, if you are wishing to speak on an item tonight, you will be in a waiting room until that item is called. If you'd like to follow along, you need to be watching on TV 30 or on the stream, on the live stream. Tonight we have some new agenda item with our recognitions I'm pretty excited about. But before we get to that, I'll do some introductions, and we also have some report out from closed session. So with us here tonight, to my right, is our superintendent, Dr. David Haglund, our vice president of the board, Mark Miller, trustee Steve Maher, trustee Kelly McCaughey, trustee Mary Jo Carrion, and cabinet we have Dr. Janelle Woodward, the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, Mr. Ed Dialazzo, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Mr. Julio Hernandez, the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. Ahmed Sheikh Al-Islami, the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, and Mr. Patrick Gannon, who is our Coordinator of Communications and Community Engagement with us this evening, and he'll be handling the public comment. And also tonight, we have our student board member from our middle college program, Carlissa Bass. Carlissa, are you on the Zoom with us tonight? Welcome, so good to see you. All right, so we do have a few things to report out from closed session. The first, I'm very excited to announce that a unanimous vote, of course, to welcome the appointment of a Coordinator 1 for Maintenance and Transportation, Mr. Joe Plashati. Mr. Plashati, are you here this evening on the Zoom? And correct me if I mispronounced your name, please. You are on mute. Nope, still muted, sorry. Well, Mr. Gannon, is there anything we can do about that? Well, we're glad to have you, and if we can get your volume worked out, we'll have you join us again in just a few minutes. Please interrupt me if we can get that going. I'd love to hear from our new coordinator of maintenance and transportation. All right, and then moving on to a couple other readouts from closed session. On item 2.3.1, the board voted on a unanimous decision with trustee Carrion making the motion and seconded by trustee McCaughey. The board rejected the tort claim number 591222, student versus Pleasanton Unified School District, as to events occurring within 6 months of the date of presentation, and returned as untimely as to events occurring prior to 6 months from the date of presentation. And on item 2.3.2, a unanimous vote with the motion made by trustee Carrion and seconded by trustee McCaughey. The board voted to reject the tort claim number 591219, student versus Pleasanton Unified School District, was rejected as to events occurring within 6 months of the date of presentation, and returned as untimely as to events occurring prior to 6 months from date of presentation. So that is all that we have to report out from closed session this evening. Okay.
Excuse me. Is my volume working now?
Yes, sir. Yay.
Yay.
Please
Sorry
go
about
ahead.
that. Well, I just want to say thank you to the school board and certainly the folks at Pleasanton Valley Unified School District that gave me this opportunity. I believe I've got a lot of good experience from years in the private sector that I think I can bring to the table and really help out and do a good job. So I'm really looking forward to getting started, and thank you again.
Well, we're looking forward to welcoming you. Thank you so much. Okay. So then we'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of the agenda. Any changes anyone would like to make? No?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Trustee Carrion,
Aye.
Makashi,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Larson is aye. The agenda is approved. Okay, so now we're going to go on to item number 6, our recognitions and introductions. And tonight we have our first of the board member nominated recognitions tonight. So Dr. Haglund, did you want to introduce the item?
I would. We're very excited about this opportunity to give our trustees a chance to bring forward community members who have done some special things. And tonight's definitely a special thing that we're going to be talking about. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Trustee Maher.
Okay. Patrick, do we have Andrew? You got him on? Good evening, Andrew. Okay. It is with great pleasure that I am able to recognize and congratulate Andrew Holmes, a sophomore at Amador in Independent Study, for receiving the Banyan Tree Award. The banyan tree is the national tree of India and is noted for its support of all growth in the forests of India. This award is named in honor of Lali Reddy, who enjoyed life, persevered, and never let life's obstacles get in the way of helping others and enjoying the beauty of the world. Ms. Lindsay Franco, his independent study teacher, nominated Andrew. Ms. Franco states, Andrew is the type of student all teachers dream of. He works hard, has a smile on his face, is respectful, and nothing gets in the way of him succeeding. Andrew, please accept this award. I know that you have it if you can show people, and a $1,000 scholarship. I know I speak for the school board that we're proud of your accomplishments and wishes you the best as you continue on to adulthood. Okay, can we see? Andrew, did you want to say a few words?
Yes. Thank you, Trustee Maher, for inviting me tonight. I'd like to thank my independent study teacher, Ms. Franco, for nominating me, and the Providing Possibilities Foundation for choosing me for this honor. I have a rare brain condition that has caused a lot of challenges for me in a traditional school schedule, so I'd like to thank my teachers in the district for allowing me ways to continue to be successful in school, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Do you know Mrs. Carrion? Ms. Carrion, you know Andrew, I'm sure, from LSL, yeah? Yep. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Dr. Haglund.
That was wonderful. Congratulations again, Andrew. We're all rooting for you. You know, and that was our first of them. So remember, trustees, you have an opportunity to recognize someone in our community, and just let Dr. Haglund and myself know when we'd like to schedule, and we'll get that on the calendar. We're going to move on now into item 7, which is where we hear from our associations. And first up, we have the Association of Pleasanton Teachers. And Mrs. Michelle Verkeilen, are you on the line?
I am. Good evening. Board of Trustees, Dr. Haglund, Cabinet, members of our community. We had a lot of firsts today and this past week in our district. We've opened all our schools and all our grade levels. And at the same time, we've also sadly already closed down, quarantined one of our classrooms. So while we rejoice in coming back together, and it is truly joyful to be amongst students again, it is a sobering reminder that we are still in a pandemic. January was the month with the most deaths from this still deadly disease. February brought us to the marker of over 500,000 deaths in the US. In California, we've had more deaths from COVID in the past 2 months of 2021 than we did in the previous 10 of 2020. We must proceed with caution. Transmission of the virus can occur adult to child, child to adult, adult to adult. We know that adult to adult transmission is the most likely way to transmit the virus. And so it is important that we minimize our exposures with our colleagues and other adults. The simplest way to do this is by reducing those interactions by not having staff share workspaces and or by not having them be on campus at unnecessary times. We hope that as we move forward, our administration will work towards minimizing the time that all must be on campus when not with our students in person. This is the safest way. Is it safest and healthiest when our educators are not fully vaccinated yet? Is it safest and healthiest when we are having to bring in high volumes of substitutes and staff from other sites onto our campuses that are not part of our regular cohorts? Is it safest and healthiest to tell your employees that you will absolutely contest every workers' comp claim so that they, our lifeline that we employ to educate and nurture our students, cannot survive financially? Is it safest and healthiest to not provide a modicum of peace of mind to your employees to overassure them that their workspace will be safe and secured, not shared, and not compromised? Morale is at an all-time low, and it is not because of the pandemic. It is because of how educators feel they are being treated during the pandemic. Pleasanton's staff and students deserve safe and healthy schools, and it really won't take much for us to show that that's the case. Many of our surrounding districts have done this by working together with their educators, allowing educators to work remotely whenever they are teaching remotely, as this mitigates the risk of spreading COVID, by accommodating individuals to still work remotely when their individual circumstances necessitate it, by providing flexibility where they can because we are still not in normal times. Surrounding districts have kept qualified certificated staff in front of their students by doing this. We can do this too. Board, I was glad to see you asking questions last time. You need to keep asking questions. Keep talking with your teachers, your specialists, your non-classroom educators, your classified staff. We have a lot to say. We know a lot. We're on the front lines. We're living it. It is important to put students first when we make decisions that impact our students' education. Is it better to allow compromised individuals to work remotely so that their students have continuity in their education with their highly qualified credentialed teacher? Or better to have a substitute take over the class? Is it better to reassure educators that if they have to quarantine but still feel well, that they can continue to work remotely to teach their students, or to leave everyone wondering? Our educators want to teach their students in person or remotely as much as they can, as long as they feel well. Some of the choices that have been made here in Pleasanton have taken highly qualified, experienced teachers and specialists from out in front of the students and put substitutes in their place. We appreciate and are grateful for our substitutes. Thank you so much. But how is that giving Pleasanton students the best? Pleasanton students deserve the best. Let's make sure they get that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from the California School Employees Association, Mr. Derek Pizarros. Is Derek with us tonight? Sorry, I don't see you on the call. If you join us later, please give a wave out, shout out, and we'll come back to that. Okay. At this time, we have an opportunity for the public to speak to the board on matters that are not on our agenda. Mr. Gannon, do we have any public comment? Oh, Derek's here. Let's back up just a little bit and let's hear from our CSEA president.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to acknowledge Michelle's praise and concerns, and but this evening I wanted to mostly focus on, at least for CSEA, gratitude to my fellow members who, through all of this have been with students, have been in the classrooms, have been on the sites, have been doing the cleaning, the vacuuming, and been hands-on with the teaching. And so I want to acknowledge them this evening and thank them. I want to thank negotiations and the representatives of the district who are helping me move forward with some MOUs. And I want to thank the community for their constant support of the classified staff. I know there's a lot of stuff that we need to go through. Michelle touched on a lot of it, but for the messaging tonight, I just want to keep us focused on gratitude and where we are moving forward. So thank you everybody for the time, and good luck this evening.
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Gannon, do we have any public comment on items not on our agenda tonight?
Yes, we do. We have 4.
Okay, let's go ahead. Just a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes.
So first up, we have Ariana Phillips, followed by Kate Duggan, and then Paul Stewart.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure it was working. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak tonight. My name is Ariana Phillips, and I am a proud elementary music teacher in Pleasanton. I am also proud to say that I teach around 1,000 students, many of whom I have known for years. I have worked in Pleasanton for 16 of my 19 years in teaching. Tonight, I am here to tell you that the district management did not tell the truth when they said there were enough substitute teachers. I am one of many who don't want this untruth to be perpetuated any longer. In the last few years, our district had a sub shortage, even when we didn't have COVID to worry about. But wait, didn't Julio Hernandez in front of all of you at one of the latest board meetings say that we have 111 or more subs? On Tuesday evening around 5 p.m., elementary music, PE, science, and intervention specialists started receiving emails telling them, not asking them, that their assignment was to be reassigned for today, March 11th. These emails continued through Wednesday as more and more highly qualified teachers who already have jobs, lessons planned, and students to see were reassigned because other teachers were going to be out. This is where I stop and take the role of the teacher that I have lived for almost 20 years now. Do you remember, class? What did all those teachers tell all of us at the previous board meetings? What did they say about the timing of reopening and the second vaccination shots? We all know the answer. Reopening middle school and high school today should have waited till Tuesday. A great majority of us teachers are getting our second vaccinations this week, and we have appointments. Teachers with side effects cannot come to campus due to the screener we must complete daily. We had a major problem today that could have been avoided, but that's only part of the problem. The biggest problem is that you now have a group of teachers who feels disrespected because their program and curriculum isn't seen by the district as important. A group of teachers who feel disposable and easily displaceable. Their students were left without their teacher because we didn't get subs for our positions. We have all built programs for our students, and they were disregarded by PUSD management simply because they didn't pay attention to what was said a few weeks ago. This is not what is best for students. This is not how a professional expects to be treated, and this is not what should ever happen again. Pleasanton
Thank you,
students
Ms. Phillips.
deserve the best. Thank you.
All right, next we have Kate Duggan, followed by Paul Stewart, and then finally Stacy Holder.
Thanks for letting me have some time tonight. First, I just want to share my deep appreciation as a parent who has 2 kids in the district for the decision to resume in-person learning and for being the first district in Alameda County to welcome all grades back. Great job by everyone. I can also personally tell you that after only 3 days in hybrid, I'm seeing the positive changes in my son. He's smiling and happy again. He's back to the kid that I knew before this pandemic started. So I'll continue to speak for the parents everywhere that kids' needs should always be the priority when you think of union negotiations. And now we have to ask if we can start shaping plans to return full-time in August. We've had a lost year whereby our calculations, and I'm just using California minutes as an example for a 9th grader, they were losing over 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week in instructional time with distance and hybrid learning. And this adds up to over 360 hours in a school year. There's going to be a big gap to come back from. So with the passing of SB 86, we understand that PUSC will be receiving funds to specifically remediate against learning loss with things like summer school options, after school programs for core subjects, possibly extending daily learning minutes, or using tutors to help kids come back from this lost year. And of course, this should be in person, full-time, and on premise. So we'd like to see if we could get a discussion for a return to a full-time school plan for the fall on the agenda as soon as we can. Waiting until June will be very hard for families, since alternative plans will have to be made if our kids can't get a full-time education with PUSC. So I know there's a lot of planning ahead of us, but I thank you for this consideration to introduce this to your agenda as soon as you can. Thanks so much.
All right, next is Paul Stewart, and finally Stacy Holder.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I please have 3 minutes? I did not realize that the time was reduced down to 2 minutes, and I've timed my speech for 3 minutes. May I please have 3 minutes tonight?
I'm sorry, Paul, we're limiting public comment and have been all year to 2 minutes.
All right, then
You can please restart the clock, however.
Thank you, Joan. I tell you what, I will send my speech on to you guys, and I will just kind of hit some highlights. So I've been a teacher for 21 years here at the PUSD, and in 21 years, I've been asked many times to cover for other classes during my prep or things like that, but never once in these 21 years have I ever been told that I had to cancel my class and go teach at another class, as myself and most of the elementary physical education, science, and music teachers have been told to do. I don't understand that. I've talked to many people in many different grade levels at many schools and in multiple districts, and no one has ever heard of anything like this at all. It's extremely disrespectful, as Ariana said. It's disheartening to know that the district can cast myself and other elementary specialists aside for the district to feel that I'm a movable part, subject to temporary reassignment whenever they choose. I started my career as a substitute teacher, as most teachers did, but I earned my degree and did the work to become a classroom teacher in the subject matter I love. We physical educators have a curriculum we lead, standards to teach and assess, and grades to give out. How am I to do that when I have my classes pulled out from under me? For example, due to last week not seeing students, Friday and Monday being no school, and not being able to see students today, I have not had a synchronous lesson with my first grade students but once in 19 days. Due to an assembly yesterday, I have not had a synchronous lesson with my fourth graders at all in 19 days. I'm a physical education teacher. I am proud of that. That is what I'm trained and qualified to do. I respect substitute teachers greatly. It is a difficult and often thankless job, but I am not a substitute teacher. I'm a physical educator. Please do not do this to your professionals or the students in the future. It is not what is best for students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, and finally we have Stacy Holder.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Stacy Holder. I'm the science specialist at Fairlands. Yesterday, I, along with many of my specialist colleagues, was told I was reassigned for today because we were short dozens of subs. The practice of reassigning specialists needs to be examined. It was more harmful than helpful, if not to the students, than to the very teachers our district leadership chose to rip from their positions and throw into a new one, as if we're all interchangeable. I've been with PUSD for 13 of my 20 years of teaching, and I know how to be a team player. But pitching across town at another school while I'm leaving the students at my school high and dry, how does helping one group of kids supersede helping another? Where's the logic in that? When I first got the notice, I contacted the teacher I was subbing for to get basic information, such as when to report to campus, since I was given no information at all from HR, just the names of the school and the teacher. Then I heard from specialist colleagues around the district. At some schools, hundreds of elementary students were being disrupted from their brand new schedule, all for the benefit of what? I was leaving behind 125 kids. Another specialist from my school left 220 kids behind. At other schools, dozens of at-risk kids wouldn't see their intervention specialist while PE was canceled, music was canceled, science was canceled. At my school, 13 teachers now had to write new lessons to fill the time that their students would have been with their specialists. But still, I was trying to be positive, and I tried to get the information I needed to do a good job. And then I found out that I would be teaching 2 periods of live students this day, 9 kids in the first class, 10 in the second. Plus, the teacher had already planned for having a sub this day, so she had an asynchronous lesson all planned out. You get what I'm saying, right? I'm leaving my students and my teachers behind so I could watch 19 kids sit silently on their computers and do asynchronous classwork. Ripping elementary specialists from their positions to sub at other schools devalues the specialists, the classroom teachers left behind without instruction and support, and devalues one group of students under another. This decision by HR was degrading, demeaning, and definitely not in the best interest of the bulk of our students. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you. I think that ends the public comment for items not on our agenda tonight. We'll move on to item number 9, which is the student board member report. Carlissa.
Good evening, Dr. Haglund, members of the board, executive cabinet, and the community. My name is Carlissa Bass, and I'm so happy that I've been able to be the student board representative for the middle college program at Las Positas. Currently, as seniors in our senior English class, we just finished in the book Into the Wild, and we will be moving on to doing a major research project for the rest of the semester. And then in civics, we are currently learning about elections, both how they are run and what important elements go into them. And since we just had an election year, there's a lot that we're learning and we've been able to apply to the last election, and it's really interesting and fun to learn about. And then in AVID, we are currently learning financial literacy, both in preparation for college and for in college. It's a really informative unit where we get to learn not only about loans and scholarships, but also how to budget our money and be financially intelligent. The juniors right now in their English class are finishing up the book, Their Eyes Are Watching God, and will be wrapping up that unit within the book. The juniors in their U.S. history class are wrapping up their 1930s research projects, and then we'll be moving on to their 1940s research projects. And then in AVID, the juniors are currently in career exploration projects, which allows them to look into what options they have after high school, specifically after the middle college program. They get to start planning what their possible future will look like in the upcoming years. And then news about applications. The application process for next year is in progress, and we are holding interviews this week, and students will be notified of their acceptance towards the end of this month. And the middle college program has decided to align our schedule with Las Positas, and Las Positas has announced that it will be staying remote through the summer, so we will continue teaching our classes remotely for instruction. We have a new high school pathway liaison, Miss Amy Miller. She is working with the program to help us explore and identify our career pathways, as well as the next steps for us after we graduate. She will also be aiding us in making connections to all the resources that we will have available to us, both at Las Positas and at any future aspirations we'll take on. LPC also has student government elections coming up, and we have had middle college students in the past run before and get involved, so we're looking forward to see the outcome. Students are starting to get their acceptance letters to schools, and we have many of our graduates sharing their transfer news with us. And we've created a space where students can both share their news and cheer on their other classmates when they get accepted. Since we are coming up on a year since quarantine, many of my classmates have been excited to get back to sports activities at their home schools or with clubs or any other sports, including color guard, lacrosse, track, football, cricket, cheer, etc. And also we have had our first middle college royalty, with J. Ron being a homecoming prince at Granada High School. And then for students who are interested in taking courses at LPC, Las Positas is currently accepting summer and fall 2021 concurrent enrollment applications for high school students. Summer 2021 applications are due by May 14th, 2021, and fall 2021 applications are due by July 30th, 2021. Please make sure that you complete an online application for each term you are applying for. And if you would like to know more information, please contact your home high school counselor. Thank you.
Carlissa, can I ask you to share one thing that you like the most about Middle College? So if there's any students listening in time for the application period, they'll hear from you.
Yeah, of course. I really liked having the opportunity to take college classes, not only for my own benefit, but it really just helps you to see how many more options there are available to you, because I know Pleasanton can be pretty competitive, but honestly, community colleges and other junior colleges like Las Positas have really great classes with professors who are super supportive and really help you get through the course. So just being able to get the college experience early and learn how to do things like register for college and all this other stuff that my friends now senior year are just learning about, I got to learn a little earlier, and it just helped me feel way more prepared going into college.
Thank you. That was great. A great anecdote to share with our other students too. Any other questions from the trustees for Carlissa tonight? Thank you very much. Good to see you. Dr. Haglund, your superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Larson. This was a significant week for our students and for our community as a whole. On Monday, our elementary school teams welcomed back all hybrid students in grades 3 through 5, ensuring that every elementary student whose family elected for them to return to school was able to do so. I struggle with words when I try to explain how blessed I was to be back on our campuses and to greet students and staff as they returned to their classrooms. Our elementary school teachers modeled how new strategies can be effectively leveraged to support students in classroom. They called those their roomies, and remotely. They called those their zoomies. Roomies and zoomies is the new words of the day. And today, our secondary schools welcome back our middle and high school hybrid learners to their classrooms. I want to say thank you to the district management team, our coaches, intervention specialists, and other staff who assisted us today. You are appreciated. Each step of our phased reopening was made possible by thousands of hours of collaborative conversations and meticulous planning and replanning by site teams and district staff. It was not an easy process, and it's far from perfect, but we did it together for our students. While there was some understandable anxiety leading up to this morning, and there will be bumps in the road ahead, I suspect those emotions will be overshadowed by the excitement and joy apparent as students return to campus. And there was a new connectivity at play in our classrooms between students and their teachers. Our Pleasanton campuses have come back to life. And if you listen carefully, you might be able to hear some of the magic. So anyone who knows me knows that I find my center in a music classroom. Was never a music teacher. Was never my job. But every time I walk into one of our music classrooms and see our students engaging with one another and with their teachers, it brings me a sense of peace that I can't really explain. So Mr. Grantham and Mr. Dandria know, because they're the closest, that when Haglund's had a really tough day and he walks in the classroom, you don't need to stop. You just need to let him stand there for a few minutes. And so I was blessed to know that the kids and the teachers were back on campus playing their instruments, albeit they were sitting outside in chairs, but they were there engaged in what they loved to do. And that does my heart well. You know, a lot of attention has been focused on our district this day, these couple of days, as being the first But it really is about much more than that. Today, this past week, and the whole last year, for that matter, have been about showing up for our students and for one another. I'm grateful to each member of our PUSD community for continuing to adapt, to learn, and to grow, and more importantly, for remembering to extend grace and encouragement to one another, even in the midst of frustrating times. Getting our schools reopened was only the first step. As we move forward together, please continue to do those things that will ensure we can keep them that way. Wear a mask, wash your hands frequently, and maintain physical distance while in public. And please take advantage of the vaccine at your earliest opportunity. There is new hope that the vaccine will actually become available to all Alameda County residents 16 and over very soon. So, stay safe, be healthy as we journey on together. That's my report.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you said tonight. The trustees, we've all been out at different school sites this past week, for sure. And I was joking that when I was at Alisal, I don't know why I bothered to put on any makeup because I was just crying. I was so happy in seeing all the kids and the teachers and the staff. It was just awesome. And it's so tempting now to just feel, we're just all so excited and we're all feeling, so positive, and people are getting their vaccines and we're gonna get through, it's like, okay, we just have to breathe and keep washing our hands and keep wearing our masks and keep doing the things that are going to keep us being able to continue on. So thank you for that reminder. Moving on to our agenda item number 11. This is our consent calendar, which are routine items normally approved by one vote of the board. However, if an item needs to be discussed, a board member can pull it, and I do need to pull 11.9 and 11.11. Is there anything else needs to be discussed separately? I'd seek a motion to approve the consent calendar with those two exceptions.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar, except those two other items.
I'll second.
All right. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Larson, aye. All right, I have nothing really to discuss. It's just my obligation. 11.9 is an MOU with the Alameda County Office of Education for internet service for our upcoming school year. And 11.11 is the ratifications of our February contracts. And there is a contract on there with ACOE as required by conflict of interest and our legal counsel. I just need to inform you that I am an employee of the Alameda County Office of Education, but neither of these items have any direct benefit or direct bearing on the job that I do, and I just need to disclose that. So that's what I've done. And with that, I'll seek a motion to approve 11.9 and 11.11.
Motion.
Okay, Steve.
I'll second.
And Kelly. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve 11.9 and 11.11. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
And Larson. Thank you. All right, on to our report discussion and possible action items. And the first one is 12.1, and this is a discussion about our demographic enrollment report. Dr. Haglund, or?
This report will be brought to us by Mr. Sheiko Salami.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David, and good evening, board members, staff, and community. I'll be presenting our demographers enrollment projection report this evening. So I'll kind of want to back up and review this in perspective of some of the impacts to the study. We'll look at the methodology that our demographer uses, some of those key factors in that enrollment methodology. We'll look at some of the projections between the two fiscal years, because we did a full study last fiscal year, and then we did an update this fiscal year, so we want to take that in comparison. and then we'll look at some of our attendance boundary areas, and then some considerations moving forward. So in light of the pandemic, there's been a lot of impacts, and significantly is a lower enrollment both in our kindergarten and TK and throughout those grades. And those are kind of producing a whole host of questions that we don't have the exact answer to. And so we have to take that in perspective as we look at the projections that are being presented to us this fiscal year. And how will the recovery, and when the children will return, and what will it look like in the years to come. And there are efforts underway, to kind of try to counter that through the Virtual Academy and Independent Study Program. So as we go through this report, to have those issues and some of those concerns in the back of your mind. So when we look at the enrollment projection, our demographer looks at some key factors, and first and foremost is the birth data. And so that birth data, they look at the birth data historically, and they look at how many students enter into kindergarten. So that makes up a key factor in that methodology. Second is the mobility factor, and that plays a critical part. That's housing turnover, that's what's happening, movement within the community. And then lastly, they look at student yield. And student yield is usually in regards to new housing development or planned housing. All of that information goes into the student projections for the out years. And as you further go out, the less accurate that gets, because there's a lot of factors that can change it. So diving a little bit deeper into the birth data, you'll see that Pleasanton is very similar to the rest of California with declining birth rates. And so our birth rates peaked around 2004, 2005 in the two zip codes that make up our boundary area, and have been declining ever since. And so they look at that data, they look at how many births we have, how many kids enter into kindergarten, and use that to project the future years for the students that are unborn, right? And that becomes very difficult to do. So in order to make up for this year's lower kindergarten enrollment, the demographer increased the birth rates 10% to kind of factor in that this was a pandemic year. And so that was the only adjustment in the model that they made, because if they didn't make that adjustment, then the projections would even come in a little bit lower. So that's the birth data. Two is the mobility factor. For this fiscal year, the demographer did not make any adjustments to the mobility factor. This is the data as it came in. And the mobility factor has to do with the increase and decrease of students in established communities. And so you have home resale is a big driver of the mobility factor, and immigration into the town with movement of families into our, could be apartments, multifamily, or between areas that also can contribute it. So wherever you see the green, and you see a lot of that in the elementary and some into the middle school years, that shows that there's a positive inflow of students. Where you see the light blue, that means they've kept steady, and then where you see the red, that means we've lost students. And so this is a typical, kind of in the latter years is when you see some losses, and then in the early years is when you see people moving in as they're trying to enter into a good school district like Pleasanton's. That has been the main driver of enrollment growth for Pleasanton Unified School District, in addition to new housing. And so the new housing is factored in by looking at what has been built in the community in the past 5 years. So in this table right here, you can see that there's been different types of housing, the single-family dwelling and the multifamily dwelling. Those produce the most students because the apartment complexes and your transit-oriented housing are not big, that's not where, families want to go live. And so you can see that the yield factors for those are higher than the transit-oriented and the apartments. And so the demographer looks at that, sees how many kids are coming from these recent developments, and then uses that data to project what will come from new housing developments that are on the books or are planned. And so the pandemic has impacted this in one way. It hasn't slowed the projects that were being built or the permits were pulled. Those are moving forward, and you can see some of that construction coming online, those houses being sold. However, anything that was kind of in that earlier planning process has been impacted, and one of the significant projects is the multi-family type of housing in the Stone Ridge Mall. So that one is just kind of like stalled, and so the owner is trying to figure out, well, when's the right time to move forward with that. And that was a large project of about 450 units. The East Pleasanton project has also been stalled in terms of the city's planning process by about a year. So those adjustments, the demographer made those adjustments where they knew they would make it, and where they knew the houses would come online, they've kept them. So in the short and medium term, there's a flattening of our enrollment as it relates to new housing, kids coming from new housing. However, as you look at in the long term, which is probably 5 to 10 years in the horizon, then you factor the East Pleasanton project, and you factor the future city's requirements to meet their housing allocation, which based on the draft report that's out is about 6,000 units. Again, there's a lot that has to go from that draft report until the city then gets their allocation, and then what type of housing that will actually be and how they will be zoned. But at least we know in the long term there needs to be new housing in the community, and that will increase student generation from that. We just don't know the specifics of it because that information is not available at this time. So those were the three key factors going into how the demographer builds their projections. I created this chart to kind of show how much things have changed from the 2019-20 project, the one we got last year, to the projections that we were provided this fiscal year. And so if you just look at side by side, you can see that it's almost a school full of kids throughout the grades that the projections are showing a difference. So where is the reality going to come in? We don't know because of all of those unknown factors. But it may not be as aggressive as last year's projections, and it may not be as low as the projections that are coming in based on our current numbers. So we'll have to see. Next year will be an important year for us as we look at how we rebound from the pandemic. This slide here shows the historical projections. So when we got a report, we would get a projection for 2015. So in 2014, we received a projection for 2015. And then this was the actual. So in looking at that, the demographer has been within a reasonable range. Some years a little bit more, some years a little bit less, but I would say within a factor that made sense. However, you can see that both last year and even this coming year, obviously because of the pandemic, that variance has grown. And so that was, to me, it was kind of like a telling sign of how the pandemic really impacted the model. So now kind of shift away from the long-range planning to looking at the particular school sites. And this is it's a busy a chart, but a really important one. This one shows our elementary schools. This first column is the number of residents, students in that boundary area. And so you can see that, for example, in Donlan, we have more kids than that school can accommodate, but there are other schools that have more space than the number of students can accommodate. And so in order to make sure we got enough space for all our students, students are moved around. And sometimes it's by choice, and other times it's not by choice. And so, for example, at Alisal, there's both an inflow and an outflow of students. And so students, you know, are in that boundary area, are attending Donlan, some Fairlands, and, you know, more is from other areas, as well as it has a special day class and some out of district. And so that gives you the total enrollment of Alisal at 561. And that same methodology for every school. The percentages to the right are critical because they show an indication of how many students are transferring out of that particular school to another one. And on the bottom is the number of students that are transferring in. In some particular cases, like Valley View, there's a particular reason that at Valley View we have a transfer in of 40% and a transfer out of 40%. That's because we have a dual immersion program. In Donlan, it's mainly because of space. And so every school, there might be some geographic issues, some family considerations, that there's usually tends to be a certain number of students that might need to transfer to another school. However, when you see those percentages as high as 30, you need to kind of start looking at how schools are balanced and what's going on to make that situation more, you know, not so uneven. That's the elementary school numbers. At the middle, and before I go to the middle school, this is a graphical boundary map, and this was done in 1920 with how many students would be in these boundaries as the years went on. And so this again points to some imbalances in where the students are and how those boundaries are currently, how they currently stand. And so it's something to take a look at as the years go on, so to ensure there's more balanced schools and less movement of students between boundaries in order to get the students and the kids in the right location. When you look at the middle school data, currently our middle schools are pretty balanced. You know, you look at the transfers in, transfer out, the percentages are not that high. However, other reports in the demographer did show as the years go on and depending on where the new housing is, there could be some imbalance issues in our middle schools that we'd want to address. As, for example, Pleasanton Middle School might be getting smaller and some of the other schools might be getting a little bit larger. At the high schools, the challenge is really that Amador is quite larger than Foothill, and we do have you know, this Foothill Amador option area, which has currently about close to 600 students in, and they get split you know, between a little bit heavier on the Amador side, but just by having that split, it causes Foothill to be considerably smaller than Amador. So you have 2,700 students and you have 2,200 at Foothill. So that's something that we should be looking at as to how better to balance those schools and look at also their facility challenges going forward. So that's our attendance matrix. In terms of what we want to consider going forward, again, this is a fluid year. It's very difficult to really know where our enrollment is headed. But in the short term, I think we're going to be flat with hopefully a rebounding of enrollment, and hopefully our enrollment will increase in the next couple of years. Luckily, there's going to be no funding impact in the coming year if enrollment is lower because of the way our funding is going to be based on 1920 levels. However, that 22-23 year is going to be based on its actual enrollment for that year. And so if we do lose that projected enrollment, we might be looking at about $1.2 million loss of revenue based on what we have estimated, which is between the two studies, kind of looking at that enrollment kind of coming in between the two studies. Long term, as I indicated, our enrollment will rebound with new housing and the mobility factor picking up. And we do need to be looking at our imbalance boundaries as we are embarking on our Measure I-1 projects. We want to make sure that we focus our dollar strategically as we look at the factors of new housing and other things to ensure that we build the facilities in the right locations. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Yes, go ahead.
I just have one, and I'm just wondering, and I don't know if you have the answer to this. If we had a solid plan for next year, would, like, say we were going to go back full time, I mean, just theoretically, do you think our enrollment numbers would come back? I'm thinking of the loss of 400, and do we have plans to try to get that in place?
That's like that is the million-dollar question. From my discussions and from my just knowledge of how these things work, it's not going to be an instantaneous recovery. It will take time, because when we looked at the data with student services, some of those students have left the state. Some of those students have left the country, right? And so, how those choices are reversed and how those families come back is a factor. The other factor is really what I was talking about, was the mobility factor. As you can see everywhere, there's not a lot of houses on the market. When there's not a lot of houses on the market, you're not getting new families coming in, right? So I think it'll take a little bit of time. I do think there'll be a rebound if things get back to more normal, but the level of rebound is really, really hard to predict right now.
President Larson, I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
First, I wanted to thank you, Mr. Shekelislami, for all the time that you spent on putting this together and for answering a lot of the questions that I had put forth ahead of time prior to this meeting. I really appreciate the time and clarifications. One thing that I want to touch on related to the 1.2 million deficit, what are the key strategies that you're thinking of to help address that income, that revenue loss?
So I think we talked about a little bit of this. I think, the Pleasanton Unified's brand is key to being able to rebound and attract students back to our schools as we navigate it. I think key to that is also creating opportunities for students who have different needs, and I think the independent studying option in the virtual academy, it can be a great leverage for those students who really find that as the pathway. And it's just to continue that outreach, to our community to return. So there's certain factors that are in our control, and there are many more that are not. So the ones that are in our control, we want to make sure we really dial those in, be connected to those families, have talks. Every student counts. We want to get all our students in Pleasanton Unified.
Okay, and just to follow up on one point that you just made about the virtual academy, I know I asked it in the communication, but could you just share to the public a little bit more about how the virtual academy can help increase with revenue?
Great. So for every student that attends, the district receives funding from the state. So for every student that stays with PUSD, we retain that funding. And for every student that returns, we gain that funding. And for students within the greater Tri-Valley area that feel that this is the right fit for them, if they were to attend our school district, we would get the revenue for them attending our school district as well. So it can play an important role in retention, can play an important role in bringing some students back who have left, that 400 students. and it could play a role for students in our local area who would find this as a good educational model for them, and then that would be a net add of students.
Okay, and then I have one other question and then just one last comment. So what I've noticed on your matrix slides, especially like the elementary attendance matrix, it really stands out about the, transfers in and transfers out, especially for this school year, which is alarming considering our enrollment's down by 400. So I think my big question is, your last recommendation is to reconsider the boundaries to help make everything a little more balanced. So what timeline would we think about talking about that or discussing that in greater detail? Because as you said, the city's plan for housing for 2023 hasn't been started yet, and so we don't have all the information on RENA numbers and all that. So, one school of thought would be, instead of waiting for that, to help minimize all the imbalance, ins and out, transfers, overflow, especially in Donlan, what timeline would we want to think about that boundary change? Because it is my understanding we haven't changed boundaries since 2000. I believe that's what had been mentioned.
Correct. We had to search deep and because within our young administrative that historical knowledge wasn't there. So I think some of our board members who've had that knowledge brought that. And so back at, I believe, when Moore was added, and Steve, correct me, is it Moore Elementary School, and was there some, I think?
It was 1997, and then Hart did some shifting.
So it's been a while, over 20, over 20
21 years,
yeah.
right. So I guess that's what my question is.
Yeah, and it is very typical that school districts, of our size, need to recalibrate every so often. It's just the way it is. Neighborhoods are new and neighborhoods mature and so if you don't recalibrate, you're going to have to shift students around because you can't just keep building in one school being low. And so I think Student Services has done a really great job of doing that over the years. However, it does leave families in difficult situations when they can't attend schools, their local school. And so what we will be bringing to the board in a future meeting in April is a plan moving forward. How do we have some committees, a technical committee and a stakeholder committee that would start to look at that process and bring back recommendations to the board. And so that will probably be next year's work. We'll get that process and those systems set up. We can then, synchronize it also some with the city and help them and work closely with the city as they look at their new housing element plan. So it will be quite a bit of a heavy lift, but I think we will start the planning process this spring and have that committee hopefully up and running by summer and working throughout next year.
Okay, thank you. And then just one last observation to the point about the new housing slide. And you're right, there's a lot of factors that are going to impact the housing. I really appreciate the point talking about how a lot of the housing plans are currently on hold. So I really do think that as we think once again about that overflow and the boundary issues, I think the sooner we can focus on that, it might help with the mobility issues of the students. So thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, Matt, I just have one question. As you work with the budget committee, are we looking to reduce the amount of cut, what happened, the 1.2 and the following year? Will we cut something out next year so it's not as drastic for 1 year?
Correct. So we on a regular basis work on that enrollment. We work closely with Student Services and then with HR. So when our enrollment does go down, we go class by class, school by school, and then look at those locations where we no longer need a class, and then we'll be able, through the natural process of staff moving and that kind of stuff, be able to reduce staff so that we calibrate it. And so we won't wait for that second year. If we have reductions that we can capture next year, we'll capture them. And we've already kind of have initially looked at those numbers and are kind of working that out right now.
Can I just add something, Trustee Maher? So this time this year, if you recall at the last board meeting, we presented enrollment figures. So with those preliminary numbers, we're essentially looking at next year already. So we roll up the students from one grade up to the next grade. I also mentioned that we have done our kindergarten parent meetings. So we're trying to get a number of our kindergartners and our TK, our transitional kindergartners. From those numbers, then we can sort of see where we're at and then make some recommendations about staffing, working together with HR and business services. So we're already starting that process.
I have a question. Do you have anything you want to say? Well, and just to remind the public that, almost all the districts in the Bay Area, and especially in Alameda County, are in declining enrollment even before the pandemic. And if you don't make those adjustments to staffing, you end up in a difficult financial position, to say the least. But it is hard because, especially this year, since we don't know how many of those students are going to come back, and we want to make sure we have the right amount of staff to provide, if we end up having all of those TKers and Ks back, we want to be able to have classrooms for them. I did have a question that I asked earlier, but I still am unsure a little bit. On page 8, you've shown how Davis Demographics has done a good job over the years of being pretty close, but then we're talking about the projections, and they're projecting 14,322 students enrolled for fall of 2022, but we are going to use 14,650 in order to project our funding. So can you walk me through why we would go higher when they typically have been higher themselves in their projections?
Sure. No, that's a good question. So they're letting their model run, and that's all they can do. And so they when we met with them and said, how are you factoring? So the only tweak that they did was a little bit on the birth data. Then the birth data will only affect the kindergarten and won't have as much effect on every other grade, right? And so when we talk about we're going to have a rebound and we're going to bring some of those kids back, their model can't figure that out. So what I did is I looked at where we are this year. I looked at their last year's model, and I said that's too aggressive. Their other model is too pessimistic because it would put us, if I used their numbers, it'd put us in a very large financial challenge. So we said we're going to have some modest rebound. And so it's an art and a science. If you let the science fully run it may lead you to inaccurate information just because of the way the science is, the methodology is working. And so it is a best guesstimate. I believe we have another year to really see, if next year's numbers show a slight rebound, it'll build confidence in that. If next year's does not and looks flatter or lower, then we'll have to start, really preparing for a more, a difficult transition. So we're fortunate enough to have that one year to see if we're going to trend slightly up or we're going to trend slightly down.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add a quick comment on that is, it's my feeling that, this is artificial intelligence kind of thing is what I kind of do on my job, and these models are certainly designed to based on historical data mostly, right? They're fed, right? They learn as they go, and I just don't think this is a situation that lends itself to easily updating that model, right? Because nobody's ever had a pandemic like this or some major event like this, and so my recommendation, and I think this is exactly what you guys are doing, is to just work in ranges. It's going to be between here and there, and because we just don't know. I mean, it's going to be so variable, and so flexibility. I just can't stress that enough. We have to be conservative in our budgeting to anticipate a possible downside, but be ready to respond, should the numbers go up. That's the only thing, because we're just not going to get a good prediction. I don't think so.
Yeah, and that's exactly what our demographer said. He says, this is the 1 year that I really don't know how to, advise school districts, because this is such an anomaly that they've never dealt with.
And to complicate things a little farther, all those decisions, because of the way the Ed Code works with certificated staff, we have to notice them by March 15th for the following year. And so this is really, again, it is science, but it is an art, and you guys are doing a great job. But it is a really challenging year for us to look ahead at this. And Mark and I request that you wait 2 years to do the boundary changes. So just.
Put that on an agenda item. I'm going to put that on the agenda item.
Are there any further questions on this item? It's just a report and discussion.
President Larson, if I could just add something to the discussion about staffing. We in fact did not put a resolution for a layoff notice for the next school year. We feel confident that within the range of our temp releases, which the board did take action on, we have that range that will not impact our probes and our permanent staff comfortably. Now again, anything could change, as we know. But within looking at the enrollment numbers as well as our current staffing numbers and our credentials, is the reason why the layoff notice was not presented to the board.
And that's what we like to hear. We want to keep our staff and our teachers that we've got. So that was good news for us and for them as well. Thank you for that clarification. All right, so it's still Mr. Sheikh Laslami. We have report, discussion, and possible action on the second interim budget, item 12.2.
Wanted to begin by thanking our staff, Tom, Greg, Kathy, and the team for putting the report together. The report is comprised of the written report and the SACS documents that get submitted to the county and state for review. And both Tom and I are available afterwards to answer any questions after I go through the presentation. So in looking at the second interim, some key takeaway is that we do meet the requirements for positive certification. And just to remind the board, that is that we meet the current fiscal year requirements and the 2 out years at a 3% minimum reserve rate. And so we do meet that, and so we can recommend a positive certification for this report to the board. The pandemic, similar to the enrollment projections, has truly created a fluid and dynamic situation which continues to challenge our budgetary planning. Fortunately, the district did receive a significant amount of resources to help with that, and our district put those resources to work. And we spent those dollars on PPE, we spent to get our schools safe and ready, and we provided technology both for students and staff. And I saw that, myself firsthand, both at the elementary schools and the middle schools being utilized. Additionally, we brought in technical people, coordinators, and others to help support the professional development training. And I, again, have firsthand seen the positive results of that additional staffing. Secondly, there is slight improvement from the first interim, but we do continue to deficit spend. That deficit spending was planned. We made reductions last year, but we also knew that we didn't want to make those reductions too deep and that we would be doing deficit spending in 2021. The multi-year also shows improvements. However, we do return to deficit spending in 22-23, and I'll go into the details in the future slides. So in terms of the adjustments, we do see increased revenue, and mainly those are through one-time funds. And so if you look at, the ESSER grant, that was the federal stimulus dollars that was approved in December. ESSER 2, we received the preschool grant. That currently is in design services, and so once it goes in construction, those dollars will be spent on that, and we receive various donations. So increased funding, but mostly one-time and restricted in purpose. There was quite a bit of movement in the in our adjustments to our expenditures, and so in terms of staffing, there was a decrease in our salaries and wages and benefits. However, a lot of that dollars got shifted into contracted services, and especially in the area of special education, where we were unable to fill a lot of the positions, we had to contract those services out. We did also move some of the funds out of books and supplies and materials in our technology plan, and we put it in a designated category so that it doesn't look like next year we'll be carrying it over. It's meant to be spent every so often on replacement cycles for our teaching staff and others' computers. And so that we did that for accounting purposes. And lastly, as we indicated, there's additional money coming in from the grant, and so there'll be expenditures related to the preschool grant. And as we are making also our field renovation, there was increased cost there as well. You've seen this pie chart a lot. This is our breakdown of our revenues. One thing this year that you'll see is that both the other state and federal percentages are higher, and that has to do with the $7 million of one-time money we have received. It also includes a greater carryover revenues from last year. One thing to note is the LCFF for this fiscal year had a 0% COLA, and so those monies we're never going to recover. I mean those are lost dollars, but we'll see some of that made up in the coming years with what we're calling the catch-up COLA now. In terms of expenditures, again, typically salaries and benefits continue to be our largest expenditures, are around 80%, and we've seen that percentage go up as high as 85%. However, again, because of the large expenditures in services and books and supplies related to both the learning loss mitigation funds and also to some of the contracted services, those percentages are higher than we typically see. And if we're looking at total projected deficit spending of about $7.6 million, of that, if you take away some of the carryover in one time, we're probably deficit spending around $2.5 million. We'll review some of the key assumptions that go into building our budget, both for the current and out years. And again, summary of all the one-time funds that we have received or are receiving, and how much we've expended. So we have spent down as planned. If you remember, back in September, October, we had a deadline of December 30th, not December 31st, but December 30th to spend that money. Come December 30th, the federal government passes the CARES Act, not the CARES Act, but the next stimulus package, and they extended that to the 31st. But we had planned accordingly. The district is going to get some additional state and federal dollars. Those are just happening, in this last week that we put this presentation together. And so I think for us, it's going to be like, how long will these impacts go? What's the long-term impact? And how best we utilize those additional funds going forward. And so AB 86, SB 86, that was just passed, approved, and signed by the governor. For PUSD, that means about $4.43 million of in-person instruction grant, and that 85% of that has to go toward supporting in-person instruction. We will meet the requirements for that required, schools to be back and open by April 1st, and so we're already up and running and doing that, and there's additional benefits that we'll have by opening a little earlier and having our COVID safety plan approved and posted in March. The Learning Opportunities Grant, that's about 4.56 billion statewide, and our portion of that is 9.35 million. And for that one, we do have to prepare an expenditure plan and bring it back for board approval in late May and submit it to the state by June 1st. We're still waiting for some of the details, and the CD has to put together their template and stuff in the next week or two. And so we'll be working closely with Teaching and Learning. We'll be working closely with Student Services to develop that plan, which will look at things like credit recovery, summer school, tutoring, academic support, additional para-educators in classrooms to help kids with writing and reading and math. Those are what those dollars are meant to be spent on, and they're very specific to their goals and targets. So we'll be putting that together and bringing it for board discussion and approval later in May. So that's all one-time money. And it's really critical to remember one-time money, specific reasons, not ongoing. Ongoing is truly the LCFF calculator driven by our enrollment. And so this is where we're hoping to see that recovery. And luckily, there's a 1-year period where we're going to have a funding that's protected. And so if we don't see a recovery, then we'll have to make adjustments in the out year. But this is the year that even with a modest recovery, it is still going to lead to a lower ADA than we are currently funded at. And this 150 student difference, that's $1.2 million. And so if that gap grows, that will make our challenges greater. Current fiscal year, we said there was 0% COLA. This is a compounded COLA of last year and this year. I think it was about 2.3 something, and this year is 1.5. And together, they make that 3.8. So this is a little bit larger. The Department of Finance is a little bit more aggressive in their out-year COLA projections, and we'll be looking at those projections, and we'll be looking at some of the other fiscal health to see which COLA for the out years we'll be using. But in this model, we put the School Services of California projections. Our unduplicated numbers are going down, and that is after our concerted effort to increase our free and reduced students. We were able to not only maintain that level of student counts, but I'll increase it. And that was a big push with our Child Nutritional Service program and also our family liaisons. However, our EL students have dropped significantly. It's a 3-year rolling average. And so that's why those percentages are affected. It's a 3-year average that they do. And so we had a 200 student EL decrease, and some of that could be potentially tied to our enrollment reduction. These are the base grants and how they work out with the COLA numbers that are projected above. And so we're hoping, again, as I indicated, that the virtual academy can assist us with retention and bringing back students and attracting students as well. So we really haven't factored that in. Just again, our models really aren't, we don't have any historical information, but that is something that hopefully next year we'll be able to report back on. In terms of staffing and salaries, which is the biggest driver of our expenditures, between the first and second interim, some slight changes. We had some ads where we needed some staffing. We increased some certificated staffing. There's some, changes in classified, some staffing that retired or were in that process. And so the net was insignificant. We do, in our year-to-year, built in the step and column but currently there's really not an allocation for additional compensation as the 2021 cost of living adjustment was 0%. Pension, this is the big other big issue in that 22-23 year is with the budget that the governor signed and approved last fiscal year, they helped with protecting increases in STRS and PERS rates for this current year and next year. And you see, even with them helping PERS is still projected to go up. However, PERS will go up more, and then STRS will go back to where, so this is the challenging year, is that 22-23, where we have the decreasing enrollment and increasing expenditures, especially with pensions. So in terms of the multi-year, we do see, again, I indicated that there is a slight improvement going from this year and next year. However, that reserve is taken away by our deficit spending in that 22-23 year as compounded with lower enrollment and increased expenditures. And so, but we are, at this moment, fiscally, we meet the requirements for positive certification. We wanted to kind of go through the designated assignments. So these are funds within our general fund that have specific plans for. The non-dispensable is just, it's either cash or inventory and stuff. So those are held there. But the tech plan is a particular one that, we want to make sure we maintain. It allows us to replace our computers and other devices. Same thing with the textbook category. Again, these are one-time dollars that we do have to replenish, but we want to replenish by putting some money aside every year, and then we'll use it as we adopt books and stuff. Additionally, when we were putting this budget together, we wanted to put a placeholder for the virtual academy. We do have staff built into the staffing model. We have 4 independent staff members right now, but we know as we grow the program, we're going to need more staff and support staff. So we put this into this designated assignment. In the adopted budget, it will go above the line and it will be part of the salaries and the program. So that's the details that we're working out. The next 2 items are reserves. This is the reserves that additionally that we set aside with the carryover dollars we had. So that gives us that extra cushion. And then the restricted funds, that's routine restricted maintenance, grant dollars, donation dollars that are designated for specific purposes as well. Finally, we're looking at all our funds, and so in addition to the general fund, we operate other funds, the bond fund and other funds. But I want to point out 2 particular funds that we need to be looking at. One is the cafeteria fund, and that fund is our food services program. And because we didn't have a normal year in terms of being able to sell food and stuff, the fund is going to be losing dollars. However, we had projected greater losses, and with the reopening of school and having a supper program, we actually think that we will do better even than the numbers that we have provided here. And we just learned that the government is going to continue the Summer Seamless program through the end of, I believe, August. So that will give us the summer as well. So we're feeling good about that, and the federal government may even decide to extend it all of next fiscal year. And if we have school open and we have that meal program, we will be able to recover. The Enterprise Fund, that's our after-school program, Kids Club, STEAM, and Horizon Infant Care. And again, with the pandemic and those restrictions, like many child care programs, we were running at a loss. And so, fortunately, we did have reserves in that fund that's allowed us to maintain our staff and our program. But looking at next fiscal year, we either have to return the program to, hopefully it can run similarly to what it ran in the past, or we'll have to make some hard decisions. We've started the discussions with student services and are looking at options. So hopefully we'll have some better news to share with what is allowed for next school year. Most of these other funds have to do with either facilities, a lot of capital fund, our deferred maintenance, our bond fund, and our developer fee fund. We do have our OPEB fund. We're going to be transferring those dollars to Fund 71 that Tom established a few board, and then it'll go into that trust fund at CalPERS's CERT fund, which will provide better rates of return and security for our other post-employment obligations. And the other funds are, we have 17, there's some dollars there for professional development of staff, which we've been utilizing this year and going out into the future. So with that, I'm just going to kind of conclude. Again, good news, positive certification, great uncertainty. However, with every day going by, we've gotten more certainty with some of our one-time dollars that we're getting more certainty around hopefully what school will look like next year. The governor's budget does look good in terms of his 21-22 year. However, even with the good news, we do have challenges due to enrollment and due to increased cost that 22-23 year. And our staff is really moving into budget development, and we'll be engaging with our budget committee as the executive cabinet works through the different goals and needs of next year. And then we'll be coming back to the full board in June at 2 board meetings to have that budget approved.
Questions? Yes, Mary Jo.
So I'm wondering about AB 86. It said that 10% of that has to go to paraprofessionals. And so I'm wondering, could we use that money on our current staff, like give them extra days, extra hours, or does it have to be brand new staff? Do you know?
That's a good question. It can be used on existing staff, but the work that they do and those additional hours has to be providing supplemental instructional support for our students. So that's the key, is that it is supporting students for that supplemental support in reading, writing, and math and those particular areas. So let's say we had a paraeducator that was working 4 hours, and we increased the hours to 8, and those additional 4 hours was to provide that additional support that would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
President Larson, I have just one question. Can you talk a little bit more? I know I asked this ahead of time, but just for general information for the public, can you talk a little bit more about the increased expenditures of $1.4 million? On that slide, the third bullet that talks about there was a $2.9 million increase in contracted services related a lot to special education, but then on the next sentence you talk about how there was a reduction of $2.7 million in special education salaries. So can you explain why there is a reduction in the salaries and just explain that a little bit better?
Sure. So when we built the budget, we want to do all the work with our staff. I mean, that's our goal. So in budget development, those funds for the staffing reside in the salaries and benefits portion of our planning. And with this year being, I mean, special education is always challenging, but this year is even more challenging. So we were unable to fill many of those positions with hiring our staff. And so we have to provide those services. So we'd have to then contract out those services. It could have been for paraeducators. It could have been for speech pathologists. Ed, you name them, we hired them.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Shiko Islam is correct. So we want to hire internally our staff. That's a great example. Speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, right now paraeducators. So we have to fulfill the the services that are on students' IEPs, and those are very specialized services. And so if we're unable to hire in-house, then we look to contract agencies to help support those services. So it sounds like that's what we
that's
needed
what we
to
did.
do.
So in a budgetary, what we have to do is we then take those dollars, away, and we take it to the line item, which was contracted services. So there's a movement of monies there.
Okay, but in general, the contracted services cost more than if we had the fully certified special education staff. Because we're looking at the numbers, because there was or maybe I'm making that assumption.
Well, there's a lot of movement within there, and that's a high-level look at it. But yes, contracted services tend to cost more than hiring in-house. Except there are some special cases it doesn't. If you don't have let's say there's only a need for 3 hours of this or 2 hours of that, then you don't want to hire a staff. But we're a large enough school district that usually could take a lot of those staff on.
Yeah, the contract rates sometimes, depending on what the position is, it's variable, but generally speaking, for example, speech and language pathologist, contract agency, that hourly rate is going to be more than our in-house speech language pathologist costs for salary.
Okay, that's it for now, unless if I think of something else. Thank you.
Anyone else? I had a question about the fields. So there was on one of the slides, a comment about the $700,000 we spent on field renovations. Can you talk a little bit about which fields those were?
So it wasn't $700,000 just on fields. And those dollars aren't, what happens is the dollars reside in routine restricted. And so, because we've spent it on fields, it's a capital improvement. And so those dollars have moved into that category, right? So it's not new dollars, and it is routine restricted maintenance dollars. That's one portion. The other portion of it, if you read it, and the grant, right? And the grant, how much we received $500,000 of grant dollars, and so there's a corresponding expenditure. So that just the two things. But our fields, as we talked about last spring, we did an evaluation. They're in poor condition to the point where they are unsafe for our PE classrooms and students out there. And so we've embarked on an aggressive plan to bring back our fields to good condition, and that has included, first of all, dealing with our gopher and ground squirrels and all our pests, and then to be able to bring in reseeding and amendments and irrigation upgrades and controller upgrades so that we can then be able to do our work better. And so the fields that we have updated currently is Harvest Park, Hart Middle School, Alisal, and we're starting work at Hearst and Vintage Hills. And so and then our plan is to move to the high schools in fall when their softball and baseball leagues are not in play, because our football fields are synthetic. So that's what we're done, and we're moving forward with that, and it's already yielded good results in terms of the PE coaches and their happiness. We have not forgotten about PMS.
That was going to be my question.
We have not forgotten about PMS. We'll actually be bringing that discussion to the board. PMS's location, its size, and its complexity and the deterioration did not lend itself to a rehab project. And so we're actually looking at trying to do synthetic at PMS, looking at a design build, and looking kind of like a broader scope. And so we'll be bringing that discussion back to the board in the coming board meetings.
And what pot of dollars are we looking at to work on PMS?
So great question. Again, you're like 2 steps ahead of me. So we when we put the bond program, when I first got here to the bond program, again, we were trying to assess the situation with Van Pelt. We feel that we can accomplish all the goals in the Measure I-1 bond program without having now to tap into Fund 40. And so Fund 40 will free up our hand to be able to aggressively then move on some of those projects that we want to look at outside of the bond.
Great.
Actually, do you have a question? Now that you mentioned that.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I have another one. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Fund 21, the Measure I-1. So it shows that we have a beginning balance of $126 million. We haven't actually, that's not what we've gone out, we haven't sold those bonds, that amount of bonds yet, right? That's not a bank account balance.
No, that is, again, Tom, this is where you want to chime in. No, that is what, we sold two, we did two sellings, right? So it's $270 million. We've issued two.
Right.
And that is what is in our bank account, correct, Tom?
That is correct. We still have more money to issue, which we can add to that balance, but we have the cash right now, so we don't need to go out for those additional reissues.
And we're not going to issue the $35 million worth of bonds that were originally slated for the new school. That's not going to be issued unless we do build a new school or something like that.
Correct. So, correct. That's how we have been directed by the board. And so when we get to the point where we need the next issuance, if we have the next school and we're ready and we're going to, do it, then we'll include it. If not, we can wait for that issuance when that's ready. But for our current projects and for the projects that we see coming out, we currently have sufficient funds to do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then the last thing is kind of a comment, I guess, more than a question, really. We've talked in the subcommittee about, again, to echo your point about one-time dollars, we've changed our board policy to where we're actually adding to reserves when we have significant carryover, and also there's, discussion that the 10% reserve cap is going to get triggered in the out year, the third year. And so being strategic with some of these one-time dollars, not the ones that are coming to us that are related to the pandemic, but other funds, and, applying them toward, the things of greatest need. I mean, those are the conversations I know you guys are going to be having with us, the full board as well as the subcommittee. But kind of the whole, project of how we're going to spend these dollars on remediation, is what those are going to look like. How is it going to be? Is it going to be this spring? Is it going to be this summer? Is it, how's that going to work? How's the new LCAP going to go? There's a lot of moving parts in there, and I know you did a great job of stakeholder engagement when we started this process last spring, and I would like to encourage us to do that again, because all of these things are so interconnected. What services we're going to be providing in the just in the regular LCAP versus all the remediation and how those dollars play into, and also the one-time dollars and how we decide to set aside, if we decide to set aside anything for specific projects, tech dollars for replenishment in the year beyond when our I-1 tech plan monies run out, for example. So I would just encourage us to, start those conversations with our stakeholders and get input from teachers and parents and board members about, how we want to move forward with that.
Can I just add on to that? I really agree with that. And so will most of that work be done at the budget subcommittee, or will there be more committees? No. So where will those decisions be made, or?
Well, the decisions will be made here at the end, but the work will be in stakeholder meetings and all those I would assume that you'd use the similar model to what you used last year. I don't know, Dr. Haglund, if you want to jump in, feel free. No, he's like, no. So I just want to encourage you to, this has been a phenomenal week, and you guys have your noses to the grindstone still at getting all the pieces together. But these dollars, we've done just from my looking at around the state, we did the we did what was the right thing for kids with the dollars that we were afforded through the variety of different CARES Act, ESSER, GEAR, Learning, all the acronyms. You know, some other districts are going to have that money swept from them and taken back at the state level, but we spent it on classrooms and safety equipment and tools for our teachers to teach our students, and that was the right decision. And I, again, want to thank you guys so much for doing that work and making sure that, you know, it wasn't just dollars thrown at a problem because we had a deadline. It was dollars spent to serve the needs of students and to keep our students and staff safe. And I just really, I want to applaud you for all of that work. It was a great job. And as we move into the next phase of the work that we need to do, I just want to appreciate you and say, you know, let's keep that kind of global thinking going, because it's going to be needed as we move into the next phase. So with that, if you don't have any other questions, I'll seek a motion to approve the second interim.
I'll make a motion to approve the second interim report with a positive certification.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Larson, aye. All right, thank you very much. 12.3, report, discussion, possible action on the delegation of authority for the superintendent to amend the Bothman construction lease amendment for Leidixson.
Great. This one I'll get to pass on to our Director of Facilities and Construction, John Chwastek. John, you want to
Hi, John. Welcome.
run through this one with our board?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ahmad. And good evening, everyone, board members, superintendent, and community. Tonight, I'll be talking about the Leidixson project and the next phase, the step that we're taking right now. And what we're bringing to you is a request for a delegation of authority to help expedite the next phase for the kindergarten building and the site work. Now, on this project, there are two contractors. One is for the site work, which is Bothman, and the other one is for the buildings, which is JL Construction. Tonight, we're only talking about Bothman. And so sometimes we use a delegation authority for contracts when we really need to sign those and execute them in between board meetings. So we're doing this solely for speed of entering into a contract. We're still negotiating with the contractor, but we are requesting a not to exceed tonight. So we're very confident that we can either meet that amount of money or be a little less, and that is our goal. So there's still a little more negotiations. Let's see, this is the fourth planned lease amendment for this school site. It was to be the final one, the final phase. However, with the November of last year's board meeting, which canceled E10, the board elected to add a little more enrollment, a little 4 to 6 classroom buildings, and a budget of, I think it was $6 to $7 million in addition. So it affected the design of this project. And so now we're looking at putting additional capacity at this school site. There will be another amendment for Bothman that we will be coming to the board with, but that'll be in a month or more from now, once we get that contract negotiated, and actually the designs. So by approving this delegation of authority tonight will do is allow the kindergarten building to keep continuing to be built, and actually would start construction approximately the beginning of April. So our goal is just to keep the project rolling here. Let me see. The additional negotiations, we believe, will reduce the amount, if possible, on this amendment. And we've already negotiated some value engineering items. We call them VE items. And those were some grading changes. We reduced some material import to the site. We reduced some elevations of grading, so we cut down the need for retaining walls, and we also had some landscaping changes. And so to date, on all the phases, we estimate approximately $2 million worth of savings through value engineering efforts on all these amendments. We are going to continue to do that for the entire project, and in fact on all of our projects. Lease amendment number 4 is on budget, and the overall project is trending to be on budget. So tonight, the administration recommends to the Board of Trustees approve this one-time delegation of authority for the Leidixon lease amendment number 4 in the not to exceed amount of $4.1 million in change. And I'm here to ask or answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I don't have a question, just a comment that I think this is really exciting, considering our previous conversation about overflow issues. So this is really exciting.
All right, would you like to make the motion? To approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the Leidixon lease amendment number 4 for not to exceed the amount of $4,127,683.
I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion? No? Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
And Larson is aye. Thank you, Mr. Trosick. Yeah, and actually, just as we were visiting schools, I haven't been on Leidixon for a while. It was really exciting to be in the classrooms and see all the just really lovely designs and great, spacious, well-lit classrooms and excited kids. It was really nice. All right, 12.4, report discussion and possible action, adoption of declaration of need of qualified educators. Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, good evening, President Larson, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Haglund, staff and community. Before the board is a action item that's a routine action item that's taken by the school district annually, and this is a declaration of need. The need is not specific, it's anticipated. Often we receive teachers who apply to our school district from other states who don't have a B-CLAD or a CLAD. There are teachers who are in the process of obtaining their credential, who have not yet finished the whole process that we file for waivers for. All of those waivers are presented to the board in a public hearing. They're action items so that the community knows who these teachers are, what is needed in order for them to complete the credentialing process. The state requires us to anticipate what we feel would be the needs of the school district. So we often use the word number 25 in anticipation that that's what we will need. We have never exceeded that number. If we don't exceed the number, there's no need to request more authority, hence why we use the number 25. So we request the board, again, it's a routine item, but the Ed Code requires that it be an action item and it be presented to the board in a regularly scheduled meeting. If there's any questions.
Questions? No? All right. Yep.
Maybe for the public, you might briefly, what type of assignments or teacher credentials are you might be looking for, briefly?
So it could be any number of assignments, Trustee Maher. At times, in California, you're required to have a CLAD or a B-CLAD. Some states don't require that requirement. Often that is our larger number of requests. So that would require the teacher could teach for us should they obtain the waiver, given them a year's period of time to be able to achieve that requirement. Other times there are teachers who are fully credentialed but wish to teach special education or another subject matter, and they need to get competency in that matter. So we have to issue a waiver for them to be able to teach out of their credential. And again, they're given a year time to be able to meet those requirements in order for them to continue to teach. We had a teacher with who had American Sign Language. Often that's a difficult credential to fill. So again, we have a waiver they enter their program, and once they complete it in the years lapse, we're able to retain them for that period of time.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move approval of 12.4.
All right, trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Aye.
Maher? Miller?
Aye.
Larson, aye. Thank you very much. Board reports and requests?
Can I ask a few
Yes,
things?
Mary Jo.
I just want to take a moment, first of all, to say how impressed I was with today. And I want to first of all thank the community, because I know it's been a hard year and the families have really pulled together. And I just want to say thank you to the families, and thank you to our wonderful staff. Our teachers were amazing, and the students were very resilient. So I just didn't want to leave without saying a big heartfelt thank you to everybody. Our community really did pull together. And so I just have two personal requests. I am a planaholic, and it makes me anxious when I don't know things. And so if possible, I would like to know the plan for the plan, like what are we going to do going forward for next year? And I also like to know a plan maybe for spending, like we talked about. How are we going to spend that money? Is there going to be a committee? How are we going to plan for that? I don't want it to just be vague. I'd like to have a plan for the plan. Those two things, if possible. Thank you.
Well, it's kind of hard to come up. So, yes, I'd like to just express my greatest gratitude to the superintendent, the staff, cabinet. We as trustees had the opportunity to visit many, many sites. I also wanted to add to the appreciation to our parents who had stepped up for the last year to co-teach and manage their children at home. And I was very emotional this week, not just for my own children going back, all three of my children, but for just the active, our community back, seeing parents walking by to escort their children to the schools, and, traffic again going through the school zones is just very symbolic of, the aftermath of what we all have had to go through as a community, whether we are a student, whether we were a parent, whether we were an educator, a custodian, our non-represented staff, just everyone. So that, I have one report. Last week, it's all a blur. Recently, Mr. DeLazio and I went to the SELPA Governance Council, had a great meeting. It was pretty routine budget report and discussion, and Mr. DeLazio, you're welcome to add on to anything about that, but it was a very, very good meeting. And then I want to be conscious of the timing for this, but we've been talking a lot about, the support for our students and for second semester, and just kind of like a check-in on how our students are doing academically. When the time is right, Dr. Woodward, because I know it's been a really busy time, but just to kind of see, how our students are doing, because, we really want to help support those students who are struggling academically, whether they're in hybrid or remote. And then let's figure out when we're going to put that boundary change thing on the agenda, President Larson. Just teasing.
Soon.
Just a thank you to everyone, parents, students, cabinet, teachers, classified, everyone, because I was able to visit 6 schools, and everything worked like clockwork. We had crossing guards, lunch, supervision. I hope everyone realizes the tremendous amount of work that had to go into it, and then also the tremendous amount of work by parents, and then certainly our students. So thank you.
Yeah, fantastic teamwork. I agree with that. I actually have just a quick report. Went to the TVROP board meeting last night. This was their second interim report approval, and they were approved with a positive certification as well. So they're doing very well.
Excellent. Well, our next board meeting will be Thursday, March 25th at 7 p.m. as per usual. And with that, we'll say goodnight and have a good evening.